Welcome to Live, Work, Thrive. I'm Michaela Birmingham, Scary Mommy executive producer, and I will be the moderator for tonight's panel. How many of us can say we were able to set up a Zoom call before this pandemic hit? Now, most kindergartens can host a virtual meeting like a pro. Technology has helped us through this chaotic time in ways we never thought possible. And so tonight, we will be talking about how the pandemic is shaping screen time for our kids, what to stop worrying about, and what should give us pause. We will hear from real moms who have expertise in media, medicine, a mom who shuts down all screens for one day every week, and we will meet the #1 female gamer in the world who also happens to be a mom. As always, there will be no judgments, and I will say right off the bat that we're not going to prescribe the exact number of iPad minutes per day that is right for your kids. Hello, people, it's a pandemic. Instead, we will offer some tips on why all screen time is not created equal, how to help your kid transition from screen time to other activities more easily, signs that a screen time problem may be brewing, and the benefits and blind spots of socializing on video games. Let's meet our panelists. We have Dr. Jenny Radesky, who is a developmental behavioral pediatrician and media researcher. She received her MD from Harvard Medical School, trained at Seattle's Children's Hospital and Boston Medical Center. Her research focuses on the use of mobile interactive technology by parents and young children and how this relates to child self-regulation and parent-child interaction. If that wasn't impressive enough, she was the lead author of the American Academy of Pediatrics Policy Statements on Media and Young Minds in 2016 and Digital Advertising to Children in 2020. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Radesky.
Sure, thanks for having me. And I'm the mom of a 7 and 11-year-old boys who might be loud in the background. So thank you for having me.
We love to meet badass moms like you. I'm still like, I wanted to literally say your whole entire bio because it was so impressive, and I tip my hat to you. All of that. Goodness, I'm tired already just thinking about it. All right. Next, we have Tiffany Shlain, who is an author, filmmaker, founder of the Webby Awards, no less. She was honored by Newsweek as one of the women shaping the 21st century. Tiffany is also an Emmy-nominated filmmaker and author of the national best-selling book, 24/6, The Power of Unplugging One Day a Week, which won the Marshall McLuhan Outstanding Book Award. Shout out to my Canadians who are listening. She lectures and performs worldwide on the relationship between technology and humanity. Thank you so much for being here, Tiffany.
I'm so happy to be here.
And later we'll be hearing from Felicia Day, who is a pioneer in the video game industry. I know many of you out there probably have kids who like to play video games. Felicia is one of the leading female gamers in the world, and you may also recognize her as an actress on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She is also a mom of a 4-year-old girl, so stay with us to hear what she has to say. Before we get started, I have a few quick reminders for the audience. You can submit your questions in the comments wherever you are watching, and we may feature a question later on in the show, so stick around. Also important, join our mailing list so you don't miss any of the Live, Work, Thrive upcoming events. Visit scarymommy.com/liveworkthrive to sign up and stay in touch because it's a pandemic and I know you have no plans. So tonight we have a special bonus. 50 of you lucky viewers will be randomly selected to receive a free copy of Tiffany's book, 24/6, The Power of Unplugging. So make sure you are registered with your email to be eligible. All right, so let's get into tonight's topic. Off the bat, let's just say it, parents are barely surviving right now. So we're going through an unprecedented time. People are stressed, people are nervous, people are losing their jobs. The New York Times had to set up a scream hotline for parents, if you might have noticed. So moms certainly don't need another reason to feel guilty. I want to start us off with a quick clip from a celebrity mom who many of us idolize for her openness about the struggles of parenting, and that is none other than Kristen Bell. And you will see after watching this clip, even the stars struggle with getting their kids off the iPad. Let's take a look. So there we just saw the lovely Dax Shepard, Kristen Bell's husband, doing his best attempt at, I think maybe that was twerking. I don't know. But their child was clearly not interested in the least. She was glued to the iPad, really could not care less what Goofy Dad was doing. So I feel like that clip just encapsulates what so many of us are up against, especially in this time. Dr. Radesky, is this, something that you see that's a common kind of occurrence with kids when they're, just can't take their attention away from the screen?
Yeah, but what I love about this clip is that the humor about look at what we're all stuck in is really what is helpful for parents. The message of what's wrong with your child or what's wrong with you as a parent for not being able to manage this or control your child's attention to it is just not where I want the screen time conversation to be. And actually, I've been really advocating against not using the term screen time because it assumes that all of the control is based on the individual family. Screen time is something that individual families regulate or monitor or co-view around, when actually there's so much corporate responsibility and there's so much more of a kind of collective responsibility that we're creating a digital environment that is centered around child needs, not centered around, a lot of those sorts of games that my kids love to play too are really monetized. They have tons of ads. They're really built around a model that is to make more ad revenue. It's not really to help you really connect with your kid around technology. So I really want to lower the guilt for parents by helping you understand what are the design reasons that it's so hard for kids to get their eyes off of something that's just coming at them. And if she looked up at her dad's butt, she would have died in the game. I mean, that's the sort of how attached kids feel to the moment that they're in when they're immersed in a video game like that.
Yeah, Tiffany, and what did you feel when you saw that clip?
Well, I think that Jenny raises a great point, is that the business model that is created around all of the stuff that we are glued to is to glue our eyes to the screen, no matter what age we are. And because of that, that's what you're up against, are thousands of engineers and companies, and their sole job is to glue your eyes to the screen. And so, that's why for me, for 11 years, my family, so I have a 17-year-old, almost 18, and almost 12-year-old. And for 11 years, we turn off all screens from Friday night to Saturday night. And I can't even describe to you, for one day a week, it's like my family is we interact so differently because there isn't that struggle. Because once the screens are even nearby, off, around, no one's focused. And so for me, what I've found just as a parent, what really works is to have this one day that we call it our tech Shabbat, and it's just this boundary. So it's not even a discussion, because that discussion happens the other 6 days. We, before the pandemic, used to have a rule, no screens in the bedroom. And that was all fine and good before the pandemic. And then suddenly their whole classroom is their school. Right. And just recently, my husband and I are like, whoa, this all got so slippery. All the screens out of the bedroom at a certain point at night. And it was so much better. And I guess I do feel like parents need to feel like it is okay to have boundaries, because actually kids will thrive. They'll resist, but then once it's like, oh, that's not an option, I just find that they, just like I feel as a parent, I thrive with that day without screens, that it's just been good to literally take it away, and then they remember how to live without it. Because I feel like in a lot of ways, so many kids have forgotten how to just entertain themselves. And that's such a valuable skill, which I'm sure.
Yeah, no, that is definitely something I want to touch on. Two of the things: one, your family's tech break out of the week. I want to hear more about that in a second, and also about being bored. But let's first talk about something that you mentioned, Jenny, Dr. Radesky, about how we can, look at this as not a parent's fault and not put all the burden on parents, but really take a look at the technology and how, as a parent, we can evaluate the design of the device or the app or the game to kind of reveal the benefits and the flaws as part of how they were designed and who they were designed for in our
Right.
thinking about how we set boundaries. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. And, I think when I've interviewed parents for studies, many who are not tech savvy feel like, oh, this is so overwhelming. There's new products coming out all the time. The pace of adoption is so much faster than technologies were 100 years ago. So everyone feels this sense of whiplash or a tidal wave of being like, I can't keep up. But there are a few principles that you can follow to try to understand, was this crafted with a child in mind? Is this sucking my attention in a way that's actually not helping me? Or is this actually supporting my human needs right now? And you might even as a family want to talk through what are the top 3 technologies that have just like made this pandemic livable for you? Is it Skype or is it, a Nintendo Switch that you all play together? Or is it other things that you've felt have added value, have added connection, have added a sense of healing and centering to you? Or which are the ones that you feel were like, that was not helpful. That just made me feel angrier. That just made me feel more distracted, or it made me feel like I wasn't in control of the algorithm or the nudge techniques that were used to kind of get me to do whatever the is meeting their ad model. So that sort of reflection is actually not built into the technologies, right? Most of these technologies are built with ideas of like a really frictionless user experience. There's even a book called Don't Make Me Think, right? Because you want the user as they're on a web page or in an app to just be in the flow and kind of go from one thing to the next and not have stoppage cues that make you stop and say, should I still be doing this? Or what time is it? So you'll notice that some of your favorite apps may not even have a clock on them so that you lose track of time. And I want families to be aware of things like, was there a stoppage cue built into my kids' stuff, or did they just feed them more and more and more with autoplay and new recommended videos to just keep my child going? Is this something that's actually giving me ideas as a parent of how to watch together and some new things to talk about because my brain is empty because it's a pandemic and I'm exhausted? Or is this something that actually just makes it really hard to talk to my child around?
And so that's maybe something you could think about, probably, I'm guessing, not when you're debating over watching the thing and when the screen is probably not in the room. Everyone might be more objective with that conversation.
Right. I love family meetings because it's when you can just all like lay your opinions on the table and try to come up with some collaborative goals of what you want to cut down. And it might be that kids say, well, Mom, you need to cut down too. And maybe you should uninstall, Twitter from your phone or something that's going to help you be a little bit more present for us.
Oh yeah. They love to get us. They love to point it out when we do it too. Right. So Tiffany, tell me, what tech apps or screens do you find in your house the most challenging to balance out with your family? Tell us more about how this 24/6 works in reality. Is it perfect? What do you do? I want to know, when someone wants to order takeout on Friday night, how do people do this? Do you get the phone book out, or, how does this work?
Well, it's not perfect because we're human, but it's been pretty much, I have to say, and there's a lot of parenting things I don't have figured out. This one, I felt like it's a very clean boundary. And Friday night, we always have people, we're Jewish, we're not religious, but we do Shabbat. We have people over during the pandemic outside. We make a beautiful meal on Friday. So it's actually a special night. It's a night that's fun. We have their friends, families over, one family at a time these days, but it's a beautiful night. And we let people know when they come over, it's tech Shabbat, no screens, don't even bring them over. And it's pretty much the best conversation of the week, hands down. There's more laughing, there's more conversation because no one's got a phone in their hand or in their pocket buzzing. And then Saturday is, we always go out in nature. There's a lot of reading, napping, board games, hanging, doing nothing. And then Saturday night, we're psyched to go back online. And my husband and I go out on a date, and the kids call it their double date with technology. And
I like that. I like that date night incorporated.
Yeah.
And I think
when we were locked down, because we used to always go out for dinner and a movie, but lately we just like go upstairs and shut the door. And we're like, date night, But the truth is, we have a landline, which I recommend in my book, because we don't, if we need to make a call, that is what we use. But to be honest with you, it's super simple to just make your plan ahead of time. Like, we have a very analog day. It's kind of like we're showing them what it was like when we were growing up. And we have a Polaroid camera if we want to take a picture. We have a record player, but we use Alexa sometimes for music. And the kids, some people ask me, what if the kids want to read on Kindle? Because we don't watch TV, but we do read a lot. And it's a day that there's a lot of reading. And we do things differently for one day a week. And it's pretty great.
What I'm hearing is I feel like you have a really special activity plan. There's social interaction. It's not like you're like, okay, go stare at the wall for 24 hours. Like you've got alternatives.
That's really important, is that you should be replacing the screen with something that brings you joy. So I always tell people that are interested in trying this with their family, like, have everyone have a family meeting. We're big on the family meetings, although our kids resist the family meetings, but every 6 months we talk about chores, tech, and sugar. Those three things we revisit every 6 months. And but I think instead of saying to your kids, oh my God, we're going to turn off screens one day a week, I heard it really works. Like, the worst thing to say to your kids, they will start crying. And instead say, what do you wish we did more as a family? And everyone in the family is going to have a different list. It might be, let's all play touch football. It might be, let's cook cookies, whatever it is, and then fill the day with that. Mm-hmm. So it's a day of joy. And I think I read this great article in the New York Times last week. It's like, when you're paying attention to one thing, you're not paying attention to something else. And also, replace the screens with joy, because that's what we're really talking about. Is the screens during the pandemic have brought joy too. I mean, Zoom has connected people. And I'm sure we'll talk about this. I've wrestled with things that my kids have really enjoyed online. I'm like, you know what? That connected with them, with their friends, and I get it. But I think really, we just need to think, what are we trying to instill? What I love about our tech Shabbats is that parenting is so much modeling behavior, and it's the one day a week where we're all doing the same thing. We're all in it, and they're looking at what we're doing, and we're saying, it's kind of saying, like, as a family, we value being present for a day, and there's no negotiating the screens, and which I find exhausting, by the way. And so it's a day that doesn't have that.
100% exhausting. And I just want to point out a few things that work so well about your plan is that it's something you just kind of established as a routine. So the kids get into it as a habit. It's just an automatic, it's non-negotiable. And I tell parents to do that too. It may not be that they take a full day off, but you may just have a predictable time of day that the kids know, okay, in my family, it's like between 3 and 5 when the puppy's napping and dad is working and I'm working and, someone probably needs to cook dinner. That's when you guys watch some TV. And it's not what we did before the pandemic, but at least it's not going to be this, negotiating. Can I have it now? Can I have it now? What about a little bit more? What about a little, and so if it's predictable, if it's something you've agreed upon beforehand, but you've given the kids a little bit of buy-in, that they've been able to contribute some ideas, they've been able to build insight into, okay, so what am I missing out on if I just fill the entire afternoon with video games, which we're going to do sometimes. There's also like no guilt for those days that you just have a totally, lazy or bingy day, as long as you can like reflect on how that felt. And there's one other thing I wanted to point out is that if you aren't able to, if you take the tech away and you're like, I don't know where I find the joy, that is hard because you may be depressed. There's so many things that overlay with technology use, right? And so part of my research has looked at what are the internal emotional drivers that bring us to bring out our phone or bring us to check or respond to a notification when we're around our kids, because our kids are exhausting us, or our kids are their affect is so overwhelming, or it's it's not fun to be around them all the time. So I want to recognize that families may feel like, okay, we're going to have to work hard to build some activities with our kids where we feel successful as parents. Like, yeah, we connected that time. We had some laughs. It didn't feel like all this work or annoyance. And there's a way that maybe technology can be a stepping stone to feeling that connection. Like maybe you watch Mandalorian together, or you play a video game, or you have a dance party, or you do something else to kind of help you kind of feel a little bit more effective at connecting with your kids.
So those are some great, I think there's some great, tools for parents to consider for their own family, whether it's one day a week, whether it's, no TV on a certain day or no YouTube on the weekends. I think everyone can sort of self-assess, what would make sense in their own situation. Everyone's in a different place. Everyone's kids are a different age. So it really depends. So let's talk about this reshaping of our lives that we've experienced, with virtual learning and many parents working from home. It feels like there's been a rapid increase and, acceleration of the digital fluency of our kids. My kids can program like a Zoom birthday party with their eyes closed. Like I don't even have to do it for them anymore. So I'm curious, Tiffany, do you think that this kind of rapid increase will accelerate the onboarding to other digital devices and social apps more quickly? Whereas, pre-pandemic, the average age a kid was getting a cell phone in the US was age 10. That in and of itself may be concerning, but do you think that's going to be even younger?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, the pandemic absolutely accelerated everything. And I also know I was part of a group of parents, we signed the Wait Till 8th pledge, and, our older daughter was like the last kid to get a smartphone in high school. And we all signed this pledge, and the pandemic happened, and a lot of parents got the kids smartphones. Signed that pledge.
So for people who don't know, I'll just mention the Wait Till 8th pledge is a kind of like a pact among parents who, if everyone in the class or the grade decides we're all going to sign on to this pledge, nobody's going to get a phone, or we're going to delay and slow down when we decide to make that jump. It helps eliminate some of that social pressure. And so that pledge has, I think it's 25,000 schools or something across the country have done the pledge.
Yeah, it's great. And I'm on the advisory board. I'm a really big fan of it because it's about having a community discussion. I think this goes back to what Dr. Radesky was talking about like, how do we, it's not just your own family, that's part of it, but it's also like the peers and the community and the government and the companies. There's like lots of levels of regulation happening here the conversations need to happen. And, but I think that it accelerates. We got our daughter a Gab phone, which I highly recommend checking out. It's a flip phone, but it's nicer design, basically. But it really did accelerate things. But I'm definitely planting seeds right now with our kids. I mean, one of them's going off to college, but with our younger one, of like, there were things that happened during the pandemic because we're living in an extraordinary situation. But just planting the seed that just a reminder that the screens will be completely out of the bedroom once the pandemic's over, and really kind of planting that seed now, which I do recommend, to remind them that we're going to be going back to some other established rules that were much healthier kind of boundaries. And, one of the things that really struck me is when kids would go to classrooms, even if there were smartphones, there were cubbies on the wall where you had to check your phone in, they weren't allowed. And now, Dr. Angela Duckworth, who's a colleague and a friend, she's wrote this great article about how much less kids are studying with their phones near them or studying in class because their iPad, and the iPad is pretty much a big iPhone, even though you haven't gotten your kid a phone, but you got them an iPad, so that's a big phone. And when they have that right next to them, when they're in class supposed to be focusing, their friends are texting, they're beeping, and they're not focusing the same way.
So there are so many ways to chat in the Zoom on class time. They figured it all out. Oh, you know how many times I've busted them.
How do we reestablish the sacred space of focused learning, even though collaboration is awesome? And that's where I struggle because they're doing their homework together and they're having fun and they're learning together. And that's not bad. I just think it's gotten kind of, oh my God, like there's so many distraction elements.
So let's talk about that. I think because parental control is a really big issue that I think a lot of parents are looking for guidance on. And, I keep getting served an ad for this Bark app. I don't know if you've heard of it, where it's an app that scans all your child's messages, whatever games they're involved in or social media accounts they have. And if there's any alarming phrasing or, bullying language that comes up, the parent gets an alert to say, check in with Johnny. There's some weird conversation going on. So at first I was like, oh, that sounds kind of genius. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, wait a minute. That's kind of like you're letting some third party essentially eavesdrop on your child. So I'm curious, Dr. Radesky, from your point of view, as someone who works with patients in this world, as parents, should we spend our time setting up parental controls, which can be time consuming and costly and imperfect, or is that time better spent coaching our kids to navigate safely? Because eventually, no matter how many controls or limits you put on it, they're going to at some point come up across inappropriate content or an interaction with someone, and they're going to need to know how to deal with it.
Yeah, well, so there's a couple things that we can do. Is number one is trying to make sure that we're teaching our kids to try to use spaces, digital spaces that were really built with child users in mind. So when little kids go on YouTube Main, the main website, there's been all this controversy over the fact that YouTube at first didn't even acknowledge that children were watching YouTube Main. And even though there were tons of like nursery rhyme videos on there. And then when they did, they changed some of the rules so that content creators need to say, oh, this is a child-directed video. But however, we did a research study with Common Sense Media published last November that showed even those nursery rhyme videos that identify as child-directed have tons of ads that are not age appropriate. Right. And they just have tons of ads to begin with. They the highest number of ads of all the age categories because it still is an adult space that's based on a business model that's all about getting ad revenue. So you still aren't going to have this great digital experience when you're all using platforms that really are just trying to, retrofit themselves for children. And so different from like watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or Sesame Street or Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, right? Because those were all built from the ground up with kids in mind. So I want parents to feel more comfortable letting their kids into those like safe digital playgrounds like PBS Kids and Noggin and like, YouTube Kids is still safer. It still has a lot of like commercialized unboxing videos and stuff. But like, I want to make the argument that the tech companies and creators should be trying to build the digital playgrounds that really like let our kids explore safely, aren't just like, pushing ads on them, pushing in-app purchases on them, aren't using data trackers like my research has found is in a lot of kids' apps. So I get frustrated when parents then have to be the controls. You have this like messy playground that's just like filled with janky equipment that's like has tons of ads and data trackers pasted all over it. And yet we as the parents need to control it all. Like that's such an inefficient system if you're trying for each family to individually be trying to control their children's experience in this like totally disorganized kind of, sea of garbage. So yes, we need to be mentors. And right now at this stage of what the kids' tech looks like, we may need to say, okay, if you're on this site, you might run into some real junk. I want you to tell me about it. Like I'm here if you want to tell me if you see something creepy. But let's stick with these ones. Like, hey, Roblox does a much better job of really trying to make sure this is a safer space for kids, or at least, there's very clear communication with parents about how to flag and how to know more about their kids' experience. And then also teaching them, let's seek out the experiences that really like give us that sense of joy or awe or other things that aren't just like these refined pleasures of like, yay, I want to watch more unboxing videos or I want to watch more slime videos, seek out stuff that really, feels like a worthwhile digital experience. So I don't know. I hear you with like the fact that our kids were basically given iPads and Chromebooks that were like packed with distractions. And I'd love to harness all the parent frustration from this year to advocate for better tech regulation and better tech policy that's really, there are some policies out there that may go, back into Congress this year, like the Kids Act from Senator Markey, that are all about trying to make companies follow child-centered design rules so that parents aren't always the ones having to control.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I'm also work with this group, the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood, which is the watchdog group and does so much of this work as well. And, there's the three prongs because there's, there are the companies who their financial interest is to just glue them and hook them wherever possible. Government who doesn't really understand enough of what's going on to regulate properly. And then the parents who are like, And that's why I feel like, yeah, there's all this regulation that needs to happen. And there's some self-regulation you can do, which is what our tech Shabbats are about. Like, this is what I can do this weekend, is do a little family regulation against what seems like people aren't really acting quick enough on. And I think, you know, I mean, I've really struggled this pandemic with TikTok. I'm going to bring it up because I do struggle because, you know, during, it has created a lot of connection and creativity. You know, my daughter is a big dancer, and she was before TikTok and the pandemic, and she loves doing the dances. And then she's just started designing jewelry that she saw on TikTok. But of course, the big struggle that I wrestle with all the time is how many hours a day is she learning from people on TikTok versus what she's learning from us, the parents and the teachers, and just always trying to keep that in check. And of course, we know that these technologies, there's some suggestive things that can come up that are ahead of her or whatever. And it feels like this world that and I've been really wrestling because somebody's like, she has TikTok. And I'm like, well, there's been so much good during the pandemic too. And I think having the kind of conversations, and what you were bringing up earlier is, does this give you energy or does this make you feel bad? Does this suck from you? Does this make you feel like you're comparing yourself to others? Or is it inspiring you to create? And taking pause to ask those questions is super important. And but that is something that I wrestle with. And, you know, I have a daughter going off to college, and, you know, she's a very good student. And she also loves like zoning out like we all do. I mean, at the end of a long day, I do read, but I'm also on there just kind of zoning out, like you were saying, just to decompress. And that's okay too. But how do you create carved spaces where it's not a mishmash and this slippery slope all the time of everything?
Yeah, I feel like TikTok, we hear that a lot. And even YouTube, from parents who say, you know, it's fun. It started out like they were making these fun dances. And then a week later, somebody's in the bedroom showing a bra strap or something that's like far too advanced for the age of the kid. One of our producers had a kid who learned some challenge on TikTok that involved like squirting something in their eye. That was like super dangerous. And so how do you gauge what could be something fun? And I think that goes back to what you were saying, Dr. Radesky, about the playground, having all of these kind of pieces of equipment, some which are great and some which are not great. And so we are then left to help the kids navigate, you know, when they get on the seesaw and it's broken, they need to get off, right?
And here's the thing is that when you have a platform like TikTok or YouTube that algorithmically amplifies the more outrageous content, right? So they often have their own engagement metrics, like this video got a bunch of likes, it got a bunch of comments, people watch it to the end, you know, whatever those metrics are, those help position that video in the algorithm to be seen more. They're trending. They get more ad revenue, they get more subscribers that way. So the content creators have an incentive to be a bit more outrageous or sticky or whatever it is. So when we analyzed the YouTube viewing histories of 183 kids who were 8 and younger, and you can find this on the Common Sense Media website under their research tab, you know, we found that most of them, there's plenty of awesome stuff on YouTube. There's cool art instruction videos, there's dance instruction videos, but the stuff that's really rising to the top is, you know, girls trying on little dresses and, you know, being princesses and unboxing tons of toys, and people playing video games and kind of doing pranks and doing challenges and other things like that. So it's kind of incentivized the type of content that can veer off into a creepy or at least a bad role model. And it's sometimes like most people don't understand the way our viewing history tells the companies things about us, right? So my son, on his school issued Chromebook, he's a 5th grader, and he started watching YouTube videos about Pokemon unboxing, which is like his like candy. Like if you could create a video for my, you know, son, it would be a Pokemon unboxing video. So he was watching him, and then he started getting suggestions for videos about serial killers. And he asked me what a serial killer is. And I was like, what? Why are you asking me this? And then he told me that it got offered to him on his feed, even on his school issued Chromebook. And I was like,
Wow.
Well, I think that the sort of kids like you who are kind of nerdy and love Pokemon and the way you think is probably all the patterns from all the viewers on YouTube probably like those sorts of videos too. And those probably get a lot of clicks because they make us feel scared and anxious, but we kind of want to watch them. And so I love using those teachable moments of like, yeah, I didn't want him to watch a serial killer video, but we've got to unpack it. And we're going to talk about it and talk about why it's not great when tech is kind of following what we like and offering us more of it, or veering us in one direction or another. So I want parents to also be savvy about the fact that it's not an even playing field. Some things are going to get algorithmically amplified or narrowed in a way that may not be best for your impulsive kid or your kid who may have some body image issues or may make too many in-app purchases, and they're going to know that, so I don't want to make people feel paranoid, but I want them to know. So
your advice is to address it with them, and so that they have the vocabulary and the tools to be able to say, okay, this was something weird, talk to you, and you can kind of direct them or explain it to them in a way that, hopefully is age appropriate.
And try to give them a critical eye.
Right.
Towards the tech.
Or even, like when you hear a lot, I'm like, where'd you hear that? Oh, I learned that on YouTube or TikTok. It's like, well, how do you know it's true? And what are the questions that they can ask to understand what is true? Because you can't take it for face value. And I think, to extrapolate much further out, when people are getting false information, and, we saw that play out in this very scary way in our country, when hearing misinformation and how much can rewire your thinking. And I think what I think a lot, and I've made a lot of films about the malleability of a child's brain and child brain development, is it's at the most malleable stage. And, you can strengthen certain parts of your brain and you can weaken others based on what you do. And everything that you do online is kind of strengthening one part of your brain and weakening another. Anything you do in life, is strengthening or weakening different parts of your brain. And your child's brain is at its most malleable state. So what are certain things that you can instill in this very malleable stage to, like you're saying, ask these critical questions, strengthen the, taking a moment to pause the prefrontal cortex and to ask, is this true? Should I ask my parents? Do I should believe this at face value? And I think that those kind of conversations are really important. I think that's mostly why I wanted to get the screens back out of the bedroom, because when they're in the living room and you're walking by all the time, and you kind of can keep an eye on more, versus when I walk into the room and it's dark and there's a glowing screen, I'm like, like what nightmare did I just
What are you doing?
I want to hit now on something that we've mentioned a little bit, and that is the video games. So, we have a Pokemon obsession. We've got, Roblox, it seems like has a lot of benefits for parents built in. And so whether it's Among Us or Fortnite or whatever the game is, I think right now, especially when kids are in many parts of the country cut off from seeing their friends, they're using these games and these apps to interact with each other. And so on one hand, video games might be getting a bad name. On the other hand, there is a way of interacting that some would argue is a positive element. So I want us to now go to Felicia Day, who's one of the world's most prominent female gamers. She's also a mom. And I want to mention, she has a very interesting background. She was actually homeschooled her entire life. And so she says that she's very familiar with being isolated and having to go to the internet for interaction and to meet people. She went on from her homeschooling years to be a violin virtuoso, a math genius, and went to college at age 16. So for anyone whose kid who's out there playing the video games, this is a great role model. So I want to hear now from Felicia about what her views on video game socializing and how she's handling things now as a mother of her own 4-year-old daughter. Let's hear from Felicia.
Hi, my name is Felicia Day. I am an actor, a writer, a producer. I'm very well known online as sort of a mother of gaming. For me, A, gaming, I think, is engaging for the brain, and B, it can be used for socialization in a way, I think, that needs to be careful and monitored. After she was 3 years old, I allowed her to watch me play video games for 30 minutes a day. In addition to that, we played through Mario, Yoshi's Craft World, Captain Toad's Wild Ride or something like that, Animal Crossing. And so we did 30 minutes a day after she was 3 of us interacting together around the video game. And so that was something that I wanted to share with her because I do love games. And I thought it was really fun for us to do it together as opposed to watching TV. Then COVID hit and a lot of my rules went out of the out the window because we're at home and I need to help spell some time. So I allowed her 1 hour of TV a day in addition to the 30 minutes of video game. I would rather her be actively interacting with a screen versus passively accepting other people's stories about things. So that's why I lean more toward video games than letting her watch a lot of television. And I know that's different from a lot of people, but especially in the world of gaming, we need more female voices. We need, girls to be as comfortable with technology as possible and not just leave it to a boys' realm, because honestly, there's so many career opportunities that are closed off if you're not tech literate.
So what do you think about this, this option of video games as a way to stimulate the brain in some cases and to interact with, between parent and child? Dr. Radesky, is that something that you see does have positive outcomes?
I think it totally depends on the design of the game, right? So she listed off a bunch of like very appropriate, slower paced, more collaborative games. They're built in with design elements that make you socially interactive with the other people. They're not kind of filled with, themes that have to do more with aggression or power differentials. They really are, a bit more encouraging users to be actually collaborating and thinking about each other. So the other thing I loved about what she said is she just had a plan. She clearly is very empowered and has a lot of self-efficacy around technology because of the work she does. So she knew, like, this is what I want to do, and then the rest of the time we're going to do other stuff. And I would just encourage families to have that same sort of like pragmatic, plan where they're like, we're gonna do it this much, and then also be willing to adapt and experiment. Because if you find, well, this game wasn't really a good match for my kid, and they were really kind of cranky or hyper afterwards, or, this actually, when I said like my kids watch 2 hours of TV in the afternoons, I have them watch PBS Kids. Like, they are calm, nice kids who have more interesting things to say after they've been watching Odd Squad, compared to after they've watched something, violent or snarky. So the content of what you're choosing really matters. And then being able to, what I also loved is she was just there to be a mentor to her child rather than a policeman, right? So if you have that attitude with your kids of like, hey, let's explore this together. Let's check it out. Let's see. I want to see what you think about it. You're building the norm that you are there to talk about technology in an open-minded way, not in a stigmatized way. Oh my God, I can't believe you did that. I'm going to take it away. I really want parents to take away the message of this is about open-minded communication. And sometimes as parents, we get overwhelmed with all this new stuff that our kids are using. But it's worth exploring with them.
I'm going to give a plug here for the Great British Baking Show, because
Yes.
I feel like that is like the old lady show that's a crowd pleaser for your husband, for your partner, for your children. I mean, I'm in shock that my kids will sit through like some souffle that they've never heard of or never tasted, but they're riveted and the people are nice to each other. Who knew a show could be good where no one's mean? Like, fantastic.
Yeah. No, we had like a period of time during the pandemic where my son and I would just do Fixer Upper evenings, and we would watch Fixer Upper. And I was like, I don't need a glass of wine. I'm fine with just watching Fixer Upper and snuggling with my son. And then we like dream about what floor plans we would do in our home. So, anything that gives you, that's like a launch pad for you and your kids to go think of something in your 3D world together, or that helps you make meaning, helps you, sit and snuggle and laugh together, then those are the positives to take away from it. And it could be you guys snuggling and enjoying it together, where you're there together, but it could also be these virtual interactions that honestly kids in the medical community, like with cystic fibrosis or other chronic illness where they haven't been able to see each other face to face, they're pros at this. They've been using virtual communities to really connect with other kids long before we all had to in the pandemic. So there are positive ways to do it and to see other kids, whether it's through Among Us or Roblox. But again, as a parent, just talk about it with your kids, be open-minded, maybe even have them show you their world in Roblox and take you around and ask them about it. And then you can help them identify the creepy stuff too. Like, oh, that person just came to say hi to you. Do you know who that is? And how do you know when it's a kid versus a grown-up, approaching you in one of these virtual spaces?
So you mentioned, kids that are cut off from seeing each other. And I think something that is important to talk about here is the fact that schools are closed. And, we've mentioned there are so many mental health considerations when it comes to screens and shows and video games, but also with going to school. And so I wonder if, the two of you could just speak to, while parents are very concerned, understandably, and for the safety of students and teachers, there are good reasons why schools are closed, but could reopening the schools help in this navigation of this screen time dilemma and this mental health crisis that many kids are facing? I look at Las Vegas, who is currently accelerating the reopening of schools due to a spike in suicides of very, very young kids, which is so alarming and sad. So Tiffany, what do you think about, the structural pillars that going to in-person school offers us vis-a-vis, the use and the interaction with digital devices?
Yeah, my younger daughter, who's 11, she's just started a couple months ago a hybrid model. So they go 3 days a week for about 3 hours, and they're in different cohorts. And I have to say, it's so great to see her get excited to get dressed and to go out. But one thing I have been thinking about is, there's a lot of social emotional stuff. And I personally, middle school was very hard for me, and my parents just got divorced, and it was a lot of like cliques. And I was like, wow, maybe 3 hours a day is a good amount of time at school, and the rest you get the support of your house and the puppy. And I guess like there's part of me like, yes, I really feel like it's incredible. It would be wonderful for so many kids to be back in school, because I see my daughter's face light up to go to school. But I also think, it has been really wonderful to see her be around her family support and all the animals and how good that's been. And I remember how hard middle school was for me, because it was like 8 hours a day of like kill or be killed socially. And so and I have daughters. I know it's different with sons, but I do think I'm curious at the end of this, of people that have had support at home, like, was it easier for them in this kind of tough time? So that all of this stuff is very interesting. But I think on a whole, so much of learning is the social stuff and figuring that out. And my daughter will just say, I'm just able to focus so much more in classroom versus Zoom, where she's just like, it's hard to not space out and stay engaged. And I think, Zoom is so interesting because we can't have eye contact. Like even with all of you, I'm kind of having eye contact, but the camera's not in the center. And so all day for the last year, people are not really having eye contact. And that is so important for human development, for brain development, for feeling good. So I'm so excited that more kids, and that it's a priority for this administration to get the schools open in a safe way.
What do you think, Dr. Radesky? You must see this as,
I
something for your patients.
Yeah, I've been seeing, I do a ton of research, so I haven't had as much clinic, but up to this year, I added on more and more clinics because so many families were calling in saying, family's a mess. When a lot of kids really struggled with the sudden closure of schools. And then, I practice in Michigan, where I serve kids from lots of different counties, and some reopened in the fall, some went hybrid, some have been all remote. So I've had this own experiment going on where I've watched some kids, and most of my patients have ADHD, autism, anxiety, other issues. So I know that they have kind of a very unique relationship with their peers, with their learning activities. School is either a great escape for them or it's a source of a lot of stress. So across the board, though, the ones who are in person are just thriving so much more than the ones that are at home. Of course, there are definitely ones where the families are, have the supports at home to homeschool, and that's going fine. But more of the kids have struggled at home, both through, it's harder to focus and feel motivated through Zoom and other virtual learning. They really miss that classroom milieu. Like the social environment does so much that you can't distill into an app or Seesaw or Google Classroom or any of these checklists that now kids are kind of working through every day. And there's not that unstructured time where you're just in the cafeteria, you're on the playground, you're figuring out the social rules as you go. You're basically, the curriculum, when it's delivered through technology, is often very leads the child of what to do and what to think next, rather than it being much more open-ended. So those are the reasons where I think, in addition to all the distractions that I'm hearing, like the battles over, no, you need to do your math assignment. No, I want to play video games because I have it right here on my laptop, so those sorts of struggles and defiance that I'm hearing from parents all got a lot better when kids were able to return to school. So I totally agree with you that this is just one sign that there's so many structural determinants of how much our kids use media, their social and emotional well-being. And so I had a patient last week who was using a ton of YouTube and kind of posting videos where he was kind of arguing with other YouTubers and getting kind of toxic with comments. And I was like, I'm going to prescribe going back to school because your family doesn't feel like they can control the YouTube use. You don't want medication. We're going to try therapy, but I'm actually just going to email your special ed teacher and say this kid needs to be prioritized for in-person school as soon as you can, because I just need him to get out of his house. So
can you write a note for my husband along those lines?
You know what? I, as a doctor, I believe that I have to advocate for the environment to be more supportive of my patient's health. I can't just pretend that it's, each parent or each child is individually responsible for their own outcome. There's so many contextual issues like food security, housing security, education quality, the digital environment. So I never shy about just reaching out to a school and saying, hey, when are you reopening? Because my patient is struggling. But I want to make the point that yes, while so many things influence children's mental health, media is one that is this really tricky relationship with mental health. Some kids are really resilient and they can play violent video games. They can use a ton of social media and it just kind of bounces off them. Other kids are either more anxious, they're more, they have more body image issues, they're more inattentive. And I think those are the kids who are a little bit more vulnerable to getting problematic relationships with media. So I want parents to know it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. That when we think about kids and media and mental health, there's not this monolithic, like more screen time equals worse mental health. You have to know who's your kid. What does media do to them? Does it bring them joy? Does it kind of, make them grumpy and anxious and self-conscious? And is it displacing their sleep? Is it harder to, get them to come to the dinner table and have moments where they can take a walk outside or connect with you? Those are the things to be looking for to see, is my kid one of the ones this has become more of a problem versus, this is more out of control than I wish it was right now. But, otherwise we have balance with things like sleep and talking to each other and reading and, doing other activities where our kids get to take the lead and be a little bit more creative and come up with their own answers rather than, the video gamer whose name I can't remember,
Felicia
was saying like, oh yeah, Felicia being fed all the answers, that's what I think, what I've heard from parents too, is they love their child getting a little break from technology, because then it's really their kid's brain that's taking the lead rather than following the prompts or the information.
We have so many questions coming in from the audience that I know we only have about 5 minutes left. So I want to get to a couple of these before we wrap up. So let's see, here is one. Tiffany, I think this might be one for you. What alternatives would you suggest to single parents working from home with younger children? This is a tough group of people right now who are really struggling.
You mean an alternative for, I'll tell you what we did when we had young kids, because we did have toddlers when we were doing Tech Shabbat. And we would also, when we did our day without screens with young kids, we would tag team so that I also got some time off and Ken also got some time off. So I feel like the hardest, my friends with young kids right now getting through the pandemic, it's felt like it's had the hardest effect on them. But I think that it is possible to create an environment with young kids without screens one day a week, and to teach them how to exist without that way to kind of entertain themselves. Just like what you were saying, that I think one of the greatest gifts the Tech Shabbats have given our kids is, one day a week, it's like, you're going to figure something fun to do out, and it teaches them a resourcefulness that I worry, even with the binging, it sets your dopamine level and expectations so high to be so entertained all the time. And when you're devoid of that, you're like, oh, I feel without. And what I feel like my kids can walk outside without a phone, they can have a fun day without a screen. And it's like building that muscle. It's building the muscle that I can exist without a screen and have a great time. And that's a really important thing that I want them in the toolkit that they have in life to have.
And Dr. Radesky, I think you had some tips for that, transitioning from like a screen time or a virtual learning scenario to an analog activity, because that transition can be the meltdown moment, or it can be the, the argument moment. What advice do you give parents to transition?
Oh, yeah, I hear this.
Well, number one is, what were they watching first? Because if they're watching more slow TV or PBS sort of content, that naturally is kind of helping prompt the child off the screen. So like, Curious George is like, here's an activity to do at home, or Fig the Fox on Tumbleleaf is like, go play, right? They're putting in those stoppage cues. They're saying, hey, go ahead. And then it's easier for the parent to transition the child, compared to if you just had an autoplay feed of, more and more and more and more, hyper exciting content. And then I recommend that parents kind of try to set their timer or something, so you're catching the last like 5 minutes, and you see what was on the screen in the last 5 minutes, and you're like, oh, that was a cow. Well, we have a cow toy, or let's go draw a cow. Or you're doing something to use a kind of a transitional object to take what they just learned on the screen and then bring it and transition it off the screen. And that's an important developmental concept, especially for young kids, that they actually need parents' help to transfer things from 2D to 3D. So that's one thing. And then other ideas, as I've been working a lot with Melissa and Doug, the toy company, on writing a blog for like, come on, let's get some analog ideas to like help keep kids occupied. A bunch of books or other things kind of laid out in an area where there's like a tent or like a little physical corralled area where your child can kind of sit there and use, regulate their own attention between different objects, is another idea. But I agree, there's no perfect way to do it, and you may need to look for other childcare help, because we've been given an impossible task this year of trying to.
There is a childcare crisis underneath all of this, right? So again, I want to stress, for anyone who is hearing this idea of a Tech Shabbat, this sounds fantastic, maybe on a day when you're not working full time as a single mom, right? So there are those moments where you're really struggling. And so all we can do is do our best, try to stay informed. I think you both have given some great tips and strategies for us as parents to kind of be the advocates for our kids. It's not going to be perfect. Like you said, you're going to have those days where everyone's binging. Heck, half the time we don't get out of our pajamas on some days. Let's be honest. When you don't have to leave the house, flannel is a wonderful thing. But, we can't beat ourselves up over it. I think, we will move through this time. I'm really hoping.
One thing I just wanted to say is we are in such an unusual time, in that kind of revisiting the conversation, and let your kids know that this is going to be a conversation we're going we're going to have every 3 to 6 months, we're going to have it again, because the whole situation keeps changing as they get older too.
It's evolving. Yeah. And every age and stage of your kid, it's evolving. I mean, from 1 month to the next with, as your kids are getting older, it can drastically change based on what a friend is doing or based on what they've seen in a particular show or video. So we are almost out of time. I feel like we could keep talking for another hour about this issue because there's so much ground to cover. But I want to let you know that our next live event will be on February 23rd and will be about how to not hate your partner in a pandemic. Seriously, when is this happening? It can't get here soon enough. Asking for a friend. We will be talking to some experts who will give you very tangible, useful tips. You can register now at scarymommy.com/live.work.thrive. And so I want to thank you both. You've been incredible panelists. Dr. Jenny Radesky, thank you for joining us and for all you do and your colleagues out there helping children and families during this pandemic. We really rely on you right now.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you for all of your important work. And Tiffany, thank you for sharing your own experiences and what has worked for your family. I think, you've given a lot of us out there some inspiration to consider, ways that we can do things differently or try. And like Jenny said, experiment and reset. If you think that something's not working, we can try and approach it a different way. And thank you also to Felicia Day. It was such an honor to meet this badass mom gamer who I think is such a great role model, especially for our daughters. And we need more of those online. So thank you, Felicia. So to everyone out there, have a great night. This is your reminder to officially stop feeling guilty about screen time. The kids will be fine because we are moms and we know how to live, work, and thrive. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.